the daily stop. The familiar hum of the delivery truck was a constant companion to Rick, a low thrumming under his seat as he navigated the winding suburban streets. Each turn, each stop to unload boxes filled with everything from office supplies to artisanal coffee beans, was a practiced motion, almost meditative. His route was a tapestry of predictable rhythms, a comforting routine in a world that had once felt anything but. He pulled up to a small hardware store, the scent of sawdust and fresh paint clinging to the air, and hefted a stack of boxes onto a dolly, his muscles accustomed to the strain. By noon, the sun was high, casting sharp shadows from utility poles. Rick eased the truck into the county shelter's cracked asphalt lot, a spot he claimed weeks ago, tucked away beneath a sprawling oak. The engine sighed into silence, and for a moment, only the chirping of crickets broke the quiet. He reached for his brown paper bag lunch, a neatly wrapped sandwich and an apple, then pushed open the heavy truck door. The scent of disinfectant and damp earth hung in the air as he walked, not towards the main office, but around the side, his boots crunching on loose gravel. His destination was always the same, the back kennels where the older, less boisterous residents resided. He bypassed the rowdy barks and eager whines of the younger pups, a quiet determination guiding his steps. The concrete pathway led him to the far end, to a particular chain-link enclosure. A low whimper, almost a rumble, greeted him before he even saw the familiar shape. He settled onto the cool concrete outside Duke's kennel, the worn metal cool beneath his hand. Duke's sad eyes. The familiar scent of disinfectant and damp concrete grew stronger as Rick navigated the long corridor, past rows of eager barks and hopeful whimpers. He knew the way by heart, his well-worn boots thudding a steady rhythm. At the very end, tucked away in a corner, was Duke's kennel. The 3-year-old pit mix, with his soft, fawn-colored fur and soulful brown eyes, was curled tightly on his thin cot. As Rick approached, Duke's head lifted, a low, rumbling whine escaping his chest. His tail, usually still, gave a tentative thump against the floor. Duke had been passed over 4 times now, a fact that weighed heavily on Rick each visit. He saw the quiet resignation in those eyes, a weariness that mirrored his own. Rick slid down to the cold concrete, settling against the wall directly across from Duke's enclosure. He unwrapped his sandwich, the crinkle of the paper a small, comforting sound in the echoing space. Duke watched him intently, his sad eyes following every movement, a silent plea in their depths. Rick started to talk, his voice a low murmur, recounting the uneventful details of his morning route, the traffic, the odd package. Duke listened, his ears occasionally twitching, the gentle cadence of Rick's voice a balm against the shelter's constant din. For 20 minutes, they simply existed together, 2 solitary souls finding a quiet connection in the heart of the bustling shelter. Lunchtime confessions. The crinkle of cellophane broke the quiet of the kennel. Rick, perched on his usual spot of cold concrete, carefully unwrapped his turkey and Swiss. Duke, already at the front of his enclosure, watched the process with a familiar, almost hopeful intensity. Rick took a bite, the creamy cheese and salty meat a familiar comfort. "Rough morning, Duke," he mumbled between chews, a fine mist of breadcrumbs escaping. "Had to deliver a whole truckload of those miniature garden gnomes. You know, the ones with the little fishing poles? The customer had them all lined up on his lawn, hundreds of them. Looked like a tiny army." Duke's tail, a slow metronome, began to tap softly against the bars. He leaned his head into the cold metal, dark eyes fixed on Rick. It wasn't the food that held his attention, not entirely, but the steady rumble of Rick's voice. "Then I hit a patch of road where someone had spilled a whole bucket of glitter. Sparkled like a disco ball for about 5 miles. My tires are probably still glowing." Rick chuckled, taking another bite. "Imagine you, Duke, trotting down the street, leaving a trail of pure shimmer." Duke let out a soft sigh, a sound that was less a whine and more a quiet acknowledgement. His body, usually tense with the shelter's ambient anxieties, seemed to relax into the moment. For 20 minutes, the outside world, with its peculiar gnomes and glitter, found a temporary home in the quiet back corner of the shelter, shared by a man and a dog. Rick finished the last bite of his sandwich, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. He hadn't filled out paperwork, hadn't promised a future, but in these shared moments, a fragile understanding bloomed. Noticed by staff, the rumble of Rick's familiar pickup was becoming a daily chime for the morning shift. Its weathered blue paint job and the distinctive dent above the passenger headlight were now as recognizable to the staff as the shelter's own sign. He'd park in the same spot, just past the volunteer parking only sign he steadfastly ignored, and head straight for the back kennels, a brown paper bag clutched in one hand. "There he goes again," Miss Patty murmured to another volunteer, observing from the intake counter. Rick was already seated outside Duke's kennel, unwrapping his sandwich. Duke, usually a bundle of restless energy, had settled by the bars, his head cocked, listening intently to Rick's low, steady voice. "You'd think he'd adopt the poor guy already?" The volunteer sighed, wiping down a counter. Duke practically lights up when he sees him. "There's been weeks of this." Miss Patty watched Rick gesture with a piece of bread, a small smile playing on his lips. Duke's tail gave a lazy thump against the concrete. "He's certainly dedicated," she agreed, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "But never a word about paperwork. No inquiries, no forms." It was unusual. A silent courtship played out daily, visible to everyone but never acknowledged aloud by the man himself. There was a quiet intensity in Rick's gaze, a softness that spoke volumes to Miss Patty's empathetic eye. She wondered what unseen burden kept him from crossing the threshold from visitor to owner, despite the clear bond developing before them. The tension in the air was palpable, a silent question hanging over Duke's kennel. A month of friendship. The next 30 days blurred into a rhythm dictated by the ticking clock on Rick's dashboard. Rain-slicked pavement reflecting the gray sky didn't deter him, nor did the sharp bite of a surprise November chill. His beat-up delivery van, with its distinct dent on the passenger side, became a familiar sight in the volunteer parking-only lot. He ignored the signs, a small rebellion in his otherwise structured day. Duke, usually a whirlwind of restless energy, practically lit up when Rick's shadow fell across his kennel. A soft whine, a wagging tail, and then he would settle, pressing his big head against the cold bars, eyes fixed on Rick. The world outside the kennel faded for 20 minutes. Rick would lean against the concrete, unwrapping his sandwich, usually turkey, sometimes ham, and talk. He spoke of his route, the ridiculous demands of his boss, the quiet loneliness of his apartment, and the stray cat he'd seen lurking by the dumpster behind the deli. Duke listened, a silent, attentive confidant. No paperwork was exchanged, no adoption inquiries made, just the steady, unwavering presence of one man and the profound appreciation of one dog. The unspoken understanding between them grew with each passing day, a quiet promise made not with words, but with time and unwavering attention. The shelter staff, initially curious, then mildly amused, eventually just accepted Rick's daily ritual. He was a fixture, as much a part of the shelter's afternoon landscape as the barking chorus and the scent of disinfectant. 30 days, 30 visits, each one a tiny knot tying their bond tighter, creating a new kind of family. Ms. Patty's question. On the 30th day, the scent of industrial cleaner mingled with stale dog food, a familiar aroma that no longer bothered Rick. He sat on the cool concrete, Duke's nose pressed against the chain link, a low rumble of contentment vibrating from the dog's chest. Rick was halfway through his turkey and Swiss when a shadow fell across his lap. Miss Patty, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, stood beside him, a gentle smile creasing the corners of her eyes. She always seemed to materialize silently. "Good afternoon, Rick," she said, her voice soft, not quite a whisper, but close. "Duke certainly looks forward to your visits." Rick nodded, offering a small smile back. Duke nudged his hand through the wire. Miss Patty's gaze lingered on Duke for a moment, then shifted to Rick. "I've noticed you've been coming every day for a while now. We all have." Her tone was kind, devoid of judgment, yet a subtle weight settled in the air. It's wonderful for Duke, of course. But if you're not planning to adopt him, Rick, why do you keep coming back? Rick's smile faltered. He looked down at the half-eaten sandwich in his hand, its crust already soft from the humidity. The question, so direct yet so gently posed, felt like a spotlight on a hidden corner of his heart. He could feel Miss Patty's empathetic eyes on him, waiting patiently. Buddy's shadow. Rick took a deep, shaky breath, the fluorescent lights of the shelter office suddenly feeling too bright. Miss Patty watched him with a gentle, patient gaze. He looked just like Duke. Rick began, his voice a low rumble. Buddy, that was his name. Pit mix, same brindle coat, same goofy grin. My best friend for 10 years. He paused, his eyes unfocused, lost in a memory. Lost him 2 years ago. Just stopped breathing one night. Completely unexpected. The words were a familiar ache, but speaking them aloud, in this sterile room, felt different, almost like lancing a wound. I tried to go to shelters after that, but I couldn't even walk through the door without feeling gut-punched, he continued, gesturing vaguely. The thought of replacing him, of giving that love to another dog, it felt like a betrayal. He looked directly at Miss Patty, a raw honesty in his eyes. Then I saw Duke, and it was like seeing Buddy's shadow. Coming here, just sitting with him, no pressure, no expectations. It was a way to feel close to Buddy again without having to commit. But every day, sitting there, talking to Duke, it started to feel less about the past and more about him. A hesitant smile touched his lips. I think I'm ready now, Miss Patty. Ready to let go of the shadow and welcome the light. A new beginning. Miss Patty settled into the chair opposite Rick, her smile a gentle curve that reached her eyes. It's a big step, Rick, she said, her voice soft but steady. And it's clear you've been through a lot. We see it here every day, people finding their way back to that special connection. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. But sometimes, a new beginning is exactly what we need. She reached for a stack of papers on her desk, pulling a single sheet from the top. The familiar logo of the county shelter adorned the header, Adoption Application. She extended it towards him, the crinkle of the paper a small sound in the quiet office. Rick's hand hesitated, hovering above the form. He knew what it represented. Not just a dog, but a renewed commitment, an open door to a future he hadn't dared to imagine for 2 long years. His eyes drifted past Miss Patty, through the window to Duke's kennel. Duke, who had been lying down, seemed to sense Rick's focus. He rose, walking to the front of the enclosure, his tail giving a tentative wag. Rick pushed himself up and walked to the door. Duke pushed his snout through the bars, his wet nose brushing Rick's knuckles. Then, a warm, rough tongue flicked out, a quick, reassuring lick against his skin. A wave of warmth spread through Rick's chest, melting a cold knot he hadn't realized was still there. He looked down at the form in his hand, then back at Duke's expectant gaze. He finally understood. He was ready. 2 photos, 1 home. Rick's pen hovered over the pet history section. His fingers, usually steady on the steering wheel, trembled slightly. 2 years. 2 years since Gus. He filled in the blanks, the careful loops of his handwriting a stark contrast to the rush he often felt. Miss Patty watched from across the desk, a gentle smile creasing the corners of her eyes. When Rick finally pushed the form across, a quiet exhale escaped him, a burden lifted. A ripple of excitement spread through the shelter. He did it, Miss Patty whispered, her voice thick with emotion. High fives were exchanged, hushed congratulations shared. Duke, oblivious in his kennel, would soon know. The adoption coordinator, a woman with a perpetually cheerful disposition, rummaged through a stack of old files. Let's find his intake photo, she mused. After a moment, she pulled out a faded snapshot. A younger, more apprehensive Duke, his ribs just a little too prominent, eyes wide with uncertainty. She clipped it to the kennel card, then printed a fresh, vibrant photo taken just last week. Duke, ears perked, a glint of hope in his gaze. She positioned them side by side, a visual testament to his long wait, a journey marked by 2 images, finally leading to one home.